What's happening, everybody? On today's show, we're going to give out our winners of the weekend from SEC Week 4, as well as throw out who depressed this week. The Vols beat the Gators. The Aggies aren't dead yet. And Georgia doing a little sleepwalking. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what is happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. We'd like to thank LinkedIn Jobs for being the official college football recruiting sponsor across the Locked On College Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. Terms and conditions apply. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Remember, Locked On SEC is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and at LockedOnSEC.com. Let's jump into it. Got plenty to discuss. Let's do our winners of the weekend.
Winner. And now, your winners of the weekend.
Real winners win.
You know you're looking at a winner, 'cause I'm a winner, yeah, I'm a winner.
And we start with Hendon Hooker over at Tennessee. Some are saying Hendon Hooker should be right near the top of the Heisman contender list just a few weeks into the season, and he was outstanding in the Vols' home win over Florida, 38-33. Hooker threw for 22 for 28, 349 yards, 2 passing touchdowns. He was also the Vols' leading rusher with 13 carries, 112 yards, and a rushing score. His 349 through the air were the most by a Vol quarterback versus the Gators since 1997, when a guy named Peyton was throwing the football in the orange and white. Hooker now has 8 passing touchdowns with 0 interceptions on the season. Of most of the full-time starting quarterbacks in the SEC, only Hooker and LSU's Jaden Daniels have yet to throw a pick on the season. Even RG3 tweeted out Hendon Hooker is his Heisman favorite at this point. It was the Vols' first win over the Gators since 2016, just the second win since 2004. And with the victory, the Vols improved to 4-0 for the first time in 6 years. A nice breakout game for Brew McCoy wearing orange and white with 5 catches, 102 yards, and a touchdown, his first career 100-yard game. But Hendon Hooker getting it done on the big stage and a big, monstrous win at Neyland for the Vols. Another winner of the weekend, I've got Will Rogers in here, coming off of a tough loss at LSU last week. Will Rogers and Mississippi State needed to bounce back, and boy, did they, beating Bowling Green 45-14. Rogers was nearly flawless, going 39 for 50 for 409 yards and 6 passing touchdowns, no turnovers. Rogers connected with 12 different Bulldogs in this one. Caleb Ducking, the leading receiver, with 2 touchdown catches. Rogers tied a school record with those 6 passing touchdowns, a record he set last season. And it was the third time this year Will Rogers completed at least 78% of his passes. He also reached 400 yards for the 7th time in his 3 years in Starkville. Mike Leach afterward called it the best tempo that they've had maybe since he's been at State. So big win for Mississippi State. Up next, they get the Aggies. Be an interesting one in Starkville. Another winner of the weekend, Bryce Young. Look, I get it was Vanderbilt, but Bama gets the 55-3 win to start SEC play at 1-0. And the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young, got back to looking like his old self, going 25 for 36, 385 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. He connected with Ja'Cory Brooks, Jermaine Burton, Trayshawn Holden as he continues to develop that chemistry with those guys. Young is tied for 5th in the country in passing touchdowns with 13, 2nd in the SEC in that category behind Will Rogers. Also want to show some love for Will Anderson, this one who had a big game with 2.5 sacks, 3 tackles for a loss. Anderson's resume is starting to build up. He now has 5 sacks on the season, according to the SEC stats, and has an interception that was a pick 6. Anderson now tied with Arkansas's Jordan Dominic for 2nd most sacks in the SEC, behind only Drew Sanders, who has 6 for Arkansas. Another winner of the weekend, how about the A&M defense? For the 2nd straight week, the Aggie defense was the strength of their team, holding Arkansas's KJ Jefferson to less than 200 yards passing and holding the Arkansas rushing attack to just 1 rushing touchdown. Of course, their huge play came in the second quarter where they returned a KJ Jefferson fumble back for a touchdown. arguably the biggest play of the game. We'll get into that a little bit later. The Aggie defense, 2 sacks, a couple of fumble recoveries, and held the Razorbacks to just 21 points scored. That was their lowest point total of the season. It's not all pretty, but the Aggie defense is giving their team a chance to win each and every week. Back-to-back wins over ranked opponents. Miami last week, the Razorbacks this week, and A&M now 9th in the country in limiting points, holding opponents to just 12 points a game. They're getting the job done. Another guy getting it done for the Aggies, he's a winner of the weekend. It's Devon Achane. I've been criticizing Achane the past couple weeks, wondering when is he going to break out. His first 3 games never went over 100 yards rushing, but this week he did that and then some. 19 carries, 159 rushing yards, and a touchdown. Also had 3 catches for 15 yards. This was the big game that the Aggies needed out of Achane to move the chains, help eat up clock, limit Arkansas' time of possession. And Achane looked really good. Maybe they found their stride here, and the Aggie running game run by Jimbo Fisher can get going. Devon Achane, great week. Another guy who's a winner of the weekend, Brock Bowers, one of the most dangerous weapons, and not just the SEC, but the country. Tight end Brock Bowers, still uncoverable. We saw another part of his game this week as he had a 75-yard rushing touchdown. He added another 2-yard rushing touchdown as well to go along with 5 catches for 60 yards. Bowers became the first SEC tight end in over 25 seasons to have 50 yards rushing and 50 yards receiving in a game. He leads all tight ends in all-purpose yards. Louisiana Tech's Griffin Hebert, the only tight end with more receiving yards than Bowers at this point. Another winner of the weekend, I've got Marshawn Lloyd, the South Carolina running back. The Gamecocks have been looking to get their ground game going all season. They finally got it going this week with Marshawn Lloyd leading the team. 15 carries, 169 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. It was the first time this season that South Carolina had a 100-yard rusher. The first time since Kevin Harris last season, the win over Florida. The Gamecocks bounced back from their blowout loss to Georgia to beat Charlotte 56-20, running off 36 points in the second half. This game alone helped move Marshawn Lloyd up to 14th in the SEC in total rushing yards. And that backfield that includes Juju McDowell, Christian Beal-Smith. The Gamecocks have only been able to rush for just 126 yards a game this season, so they're hoping this is kind of what they need to get the ground game going week in and week out. Another winner of the weekend over Kentucky, I've got Tavion Robinson. I considered throwing Will Levis in here, as Levis once again threw for 300 yards and 4 passing touchdowns, but it was the former Virginia Tech wide receiver Tavion Robinson who helped Levis to an outstanding day as they beat Northern Illinois 31-23. Robinson, 7 catches, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns, in a long of 69 yards in this one. Robinson already has 200-yard receiving games this year and is 3rd in the SEC in receiving yards now, behind just Mizzou's Dominic Lovett and Vandy's Will Shepherd. For a team that relied so heavily on Wan'Dale Robinson last year, Tavion has picked up right where he left off. Barry and Brown, really good in this one as well, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns himself. But Levis putting together quite a resume, 3 300-yard passing days already this year, 10 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, but Kentucky needs to do a better job of protecting him. He's already been sacked 16 times through 4 games. He is 4th in a very loaded SEC in passing yards, behind Will Rogers, Stetson Bennett, and Hendon Hooker, all of them ahead of Bryce Young for now. Another winner of the weekend, the Ole Miss ground game. If you don't know the name Quinshawn Judkins, you need to, as he and Zach Evans are becoming a dynamic duo in Oxford, but it was Judkins who got the bulk of the carries in their 35-27 win over Tulsa. Judkins had 27 carries, 140 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Evans had 48 yards on a score, and Jackson Dart showed his running ability this week, 13 carries for 116 rushing yards. Ole Miss leads the SEC in rushing yards per game and is 4th in the entire nation, behind only Air Force, Minnesota, and Army. 15 rushing touchdowns is tied for 3rd most in the nation, along with the Tennessee Volunteers. And by the way, 280 yards rushing per game. That will get a tough test this week with top 10 Kentucky coming to town. Another winner of the weekend, I've got LSU's defense. It was a game LSU was heavily favored, but just a week after holding Mike Leach's offense in check, Matt House's defense shut out New Mexico, winning 38-0. The Tigers held the Lobos to just 88 total yards of offense, racked up 4 sacks in a game where several of their defensive starters were out. Now it sounds like the Tigers are going to get back former Arkansas DB Joe Fouché, after he was dealing with some academic transfer issues, and an already strong LSU defense will get even stronger. We'll see if Jay Ward and BJ Ojulari are back this week as they go to Auburn. LSU defense, by the way, they're 12th in the country in total yards allowed behind just Alabama and Georgia in the SEC. 8th in the country in limiting passing yards. So LSU defense playing very well. And then our last winner of the weekend, and look, it's weird to put a guy who lost a game in a winners category, but I thought Anthony Richardson deserved a lot of credit this week for how he played in the loss to Tennessee. He played his best game of the season, going 24 for 44 passing, a career high 453 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and an interception. But was also the Gators' leading rusher with 17 carries for 62 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. This was more the Richardson we saw in the week 1 win over Utah, using his running ability to keep drives alive. And he rallied the troops, man, to make this one a game late, making it a 5-point game. And the Gators had a chance at an upset with a pass towards the end zone as time expired just a week ago. Remember, Richardson was dead last in the SEC in passing. He had not thrown a passing touchdown on the season. So give him props for how he played in this one. He left it all out on the field, and had the Gator defense played a little bit better, maybe Richardson could have pulled off the upset. But the Gators, they start 0-2 in the SEC. It is Florida's first 0-2 start in league play since 1986. So, look, encouraging effort from Anthony Richardson, but not the outcome that the Gators want. And here they are sitting at 2-2 on the season. Thank you guys again for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to get to who depressed this past week in the SEC. There were a lot of disappointments. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, I want to remind you about our friends over at LinkedIn. Look, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you do is go to their website, add your job and the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. It is so easy to do. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering desired high quality hires and versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs, they help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC as we close the book on week 4 of conference play, or SEC season, however you want to say it. Starting to get into more of the thick of conference play, but 4 weeks in, and we ran through all of our winners of the weekend. Now let's get to, we don't call them losers, we really say who depressed in week 2. And there was a lot of depressed to go around. We got to start with Auburn and Mizzou. What the hell was that? Look, I know a lot of you may have watched this game. It was the ESPN game, came on right after College Game Day ended. It was a game that looked like neither team really wanted to win the game. Auburn, give them credit, they jumped out to a 14-0 lead, but Mizzou rallied back to tie it at 14 at the half. And that second half was just a lot of bad football. It featured 12 punts, not 1 point scored, and we went to overtime. Mizzou had a chance to win it at the end of regulation. They got the ball all the way down to Auburn's 8-yard line. And Harrison Mevis misses a chip shot 26-yard field goal. So we go to overtime. In overtime, Auburn is held to a field goal. So Mizzou gets the ball, a chance to answer. And they have running back Nathaniel Pete run for 19 yards all the way down to the Auburn 1-yard line, only to see him stretch his arm out to try to score and fumbles the ball into the end zone for a turnover to end the game. Had he even just stepped out of bounds, Mizzou would have had a 1st and goal from the 1. Instead, they lose. Auburn wins, if you even want to call it that. And Auburn now 3-1, 1-0 in the SEC, though it's probably the shakiest 3-1 that we've ever seen. Auburn will host LSU next week, while Mizzou will host Georgia. So neither team's heading the right direction, and it's going to be a tough week for both of them with their next opponents. Another depressed of the weekend. How about just Georgia as a whole? What the heck was that, Georgia? A home game against 1-2 Kent State. Your 45-point favorites. And look, Kent State did some things in this game, not allowing Georgia to pull away, but it was just a dreary kind of sleepwalk performance by the Bulldogs. It was the most points the Georgia defense has given up all season, and they won it 39-22, but even the red-hot Stetson Bennett wasn't as sharp in this one, going 27 for 36, 272 yards, no passing touchdowns, did throw an interception. Bennett did run for a touchdown. That gives him a rushing touchdown in each of his 4 games played this year. Wide receiver Ladd McConkey, tough day at the office for him. He loses not 1 but 2 fumbles, 1 on a muffed punt, also dropped a would-be touchdown catch. Senior running back Kenny McIntosh, he left the game with a thigh contusion, according to Kirby Smart. Jalen Carter has been banged up, playing in a limited capacity with an ankle injury he suffered in week 1. I'm not worried about Georgia at all, but man, after looking superhuman the first 3 weeks of the season, they certainly looked human this week, not being able to just dominate and crush a now 1-3 Kent State team. But what do we say? Survive in advance, just win and move on. And one guy that wishes they could have won and moved on, I'm putting Cam Little in here, the Arkansas kicker. I typically hate throwing kickers under the bus, but man, this one was there for the taking. 1:35 left in the game, trailing 23-21. The Arkansas Razorbacks drive the ball all the way down to the A&M 24-yard line, facing a 4th and 13. And Cam Little, all he's got to do is make the 42-yard field goal to give Arkansas the lead and possibly hold on for a victory, if the defense can do it. Instead, his kick veers just right and hits the top of the right goalpost, falls to the ground. Tough to blame Cam Little for the loss, but let's be real. If he makes that kick, Arkansas would have been set up for the victory. Another guy I'm putting in here as disappointed this week. And look, it was really just one moment. But I'm putting KJ Jefferson in here. This guy I hate to berate because he's had a really good season. Even had a really good game overall. He was Arkansas's leading rusher, 18 carries, 105 yards in a score, threw for 171 and 2 passing touchdowns. But the most critical play of the game, outside of the missed field goal, Arkansas leading 14-7 with under 4 minutes left to play in the first half. They have a 1st and goal from the A&M 3-yard line, looking to punch it in. If they do, they'll take a 2-touchdown lead. And let's be real, A&M's offense has been pretty anemic. Maybe they run away with it from there. But KJ Jefferson, he attempts to leap over the pile to try to punch the ball in from 3 yards out. It just seemed to be way too far out to try to do that. And as he leaps, the ball comes out into the hands of Tyreek Chappelle, who then is about to get tackled by Jefferson around the 20-yard line. Damani Richardson takes the ball from Chappelle, and he returns it 82 yards back on the fumble return for a touchdown. The Aggies did miss the extra point, but instead of going down 14, that play, the Aggies make it just a 1 point. They trail by 1. And maybe we need to throw Kendall Briles into this as well for even calling that play. But KJ Jefferson being the leader that he is on this team, man, can't dive from 3 yards out. You just can't fumble in that spot. And look, I'll digress. You're not in this game without KJ Jefferson's other heroics, but I don't think it is a game if he doesn't fumble the ball there. Like I said, if they punch that in, they go up 14. I don't know if the Aggies answer, and maybe you're talking about the Razorbacks running away with this one if they're able to score there. So, disappointing moment. They'll get the Alabama Crimson Tide coming up next. Another depressed of the weekend, the Ole Miss defense. Look, we gave them praise for the first few weeks about how dominant the Ole Miss defense had played. I kept thinking they would be tested a little bit more this week against a pretty good Tulsa team. I thought it would be more through the air, but it was the ground game. Tulsa ran 43 times for 262 yards and a rushing touchdown, and threw for almost 200 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Ole Miss gets the win, but the defense finally maybe tested by a decent offense, and they didn't look that great. Let's see how they respond this week facing a really good Kentucky offense. Another depressed of the weekend, I'm putting Vanderbilt in here. Look, they started strong on the season, going 3-1 with a win over Northern Illinois just a week ago, switching to A.J. Swan at quarterback. but they did absolutely nothing in this game at Alabama. I get it's tough playing in Tuscaloosa, but Vandy was just 1 for 13 on third down, 0 for 1 on fourth down. They only put up 129 total yards of offense, 6 penalties. They were sacked 5 times. I just thought Clark Lee's crew would put up a little bit more of a fight against Alabama. I was saying last week, I thought 40.5 points were too many. I was like, Vanderbilt could cover that, right? They'll lose by like 30 or something. Obama still covered the 40.5. They won 55-3. Come on, Vandy. Got to give me a bit better of a fight than that. I get it, Bama. They're tough to compete with. Another disappointed of the weekend, and this has nothing to do with his performance on the field, but Anais Smith getting injured, and we don't know how serious it'll be. But the Aggies' leading receiver had 1 catch for 32 yards, suffered a right leg injury. He was emotional on the sideline during the game, came back out with a boot on his injured leg and was on crutches, embracing his dad. The cameras caught that. There wasn't yet an official report on his injury, though he posted on his Instagram that it was a high ankle sprain. If Smith misses time for the Aggies, which we assume he will, it's a significant loss because he was their go-to guy for an already struggling Aggie passing game. The true freshman, Evan Stewart, he's made some nice catches so far this year, so it sounds like he may be the guy they are going to rely on as Max Johnson tries to get some more consistency in the Aggie passing game. And one more guy we'll just throw in there as I was reading, prepping for this. Sunday morning, Georgia defensive back Javon Bullard facing several legal charges after an arrest in Athens County, a DUI charge, and several other traffic and alcohol violations. So not what you want to hear coming out of Titletown in Athens, Georgia. Thanks, Sam, for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll get to the latest polls that are out and where the SEC teams rank in those. That's coming your way in just a sec. Going along here, Locked On SEC, and one of the big things you like coming out of a Sunday, heading into a Monday, is getting all the different polls coming out. We get to see where all the SEC teams rank. So real quick, we'll just run through it in the latest coaches poll to come out. They've got Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2, Kentucky coming in number 8. That's up 1 spot from last week in the coaches poll. Tennessee number 9. They move up 3 spots. Ole Miss number 11, up 2 spots. For them, A&M up 3 spots to number 17 with their win over Arkansas. Arkansas losing to the Aggies. They dropped 9 spots in the coaches poll down to number 19. Others receiving votes, Florida, who dropped out of the top 25. Mississippi State and LSU are also in the others receiving votes category. Both of them at 3-1 on the year. Now, the AP top 25 came out a little bit different. They've got Georgia at number 1, Alabama at number 2. They've got Kentucky at number 7 in the AP poll. That's the highest ranking. Kentucky ranked number 7 in the AP poll for the first time since 1977. So Mark Stoops, man, keep upping that guy's contract. Keep him happy there in Knoxville, or rather in Lexington. Over in Knoxville, the Tennessee Vols all the way up to number 8 in the AP poll. Again, we're talking about teams that have gone through it, man. They've gone through the ringer in recent years. Vols and Wildcats enjoying some great success right now while they can, and see what they continue to do as the season goes along. Outside of the top 10, we got Ole Miss up to number 14 in the AP poll. Again, big game against Kentucky coming up this Saturday. We're going to find out who's made for a deeper run. Ole Miss or Kentucky, can they sustain this undefeated ranking? Coming in at number 17, it's the Texas A&M Aggies. So AP poll a little bit less or more forgiving for the Aggies for their win over Arkansas. Of course, the loss to Appalachian State will always hang over their heads, but Arkansas dropping down to number 20 in the AP poll. They were number 10 a week ago. It says the Razorbacks going to be upset after letting a win over A&M get away in a game that they could have finished. No time to stew on it. Alabama coming to town. Sam Pittman has worked wonders in a short time in Fayetteville, but the Hogs have not beaten the Tide since Nick Saban has arrived in Tuscaloosa. And the last one, when Houston Nutt beat Mike Shula 24-23 back in 2006. So been a long time since that has happened. And by the way, we will keep you up to date all throughout the week on all the matchups as we get ready for week 5 of college football action in the SEC. And again, some games that aren't that are going to be lopsided, but just looking ahead, the Kentucky Ole Miss game stands out. Mizzou, Georgia will just be interesting to see how Georgia responds after their lackluster game against Kent State, and Missouri, how they respond after a heartbreaking loss at Auburn. Eli Drinkwitz, we talked about before the season, is he on the hot seat? Could get even hotter very soon. Bama at Arkansas to me is the outside of Kentucky and Ole Miss, Bama at Arkansas is the SEC game of the week. LSU at Auburn is an intriguing one from a standpoint of Auburn is down. LSU's been playing pretty well. That defense playing really well. Can they get a win there? And how about Texas A&M going to Mississippi State? Old Rodgers and company that got humbled at LSU a week ago. Offense responded this week. Can Mike Leach and the Bulldogs beat A&M like they did a year ago? Remember, A&M lost to the 2 Mississippi schools last year. It looks like Jimbo has got the train back on the tracks here, beating back-to-back ranked opponents. Can they beat Mississippi State next week? We're going to talk about it all this week on Locked On SEC. Again, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Now you can go make your second listen. Check out some of our other great podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network covering your team every day. Go check them out. We got Locked On Ole Miss. We got Locked On Vols. We got Locked On Bama. Whatever school you're looking for, chances are we got you covered. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.